everybody, this is Audra here at Homesteading in Idaho. So I did a video talking about how we use roses, whole like this. We put them in coconut oil or another solid fat like lard, tallow, you name it. And we're going to do a Rose Enfleurage. We're going to allow this to cook, absorb the flavors for 2 to 6 weeks, maybe longer. We'll see where we get. But what if we've got some roses, like my one rose bush is really finicky. So I have these roses off of it. They're still good, but they lose their petals very, very quickly. It just drops petals like crazy, so I end up with a lot of just petals hanging out. So what if we make an enfleurage from just the petals? Absolutely, you can definitely do that. So, same thing we did with this one. We're going to do in a smaller jar just because I really don't need this much room for petals. I'm going to put it in a smaller jar. So today I am using organic coconut oil. Now this one does have a coconut smell. You really want one that doesn't have smell, but I really don't mind the smell of coconut. It's what I had on hand. My beef tallow isn't quite ready yet to use, so guess what? I'm using this today. But yeah, you want a solid fat that's going to be solid at room temperature. This isn't the greatest idea for Idaho if I have, if I'm being honest. Above about 72, 75 degrees, it gets pretty liquid. Oh well, darn it, I'll just maybe put it in the fridge. I don't know. And that's not in the fridge while it's rendering, while it's absorbing smells. I'll put it in the fridge maybe after this whole process is done. But honestly, I don't mind dipping my finger in some oil that's all runny, whatever. Anyway, we're going to put about 1/2 inch in the bottom of this jar. Just coat it in there really good. Now, if you want to make this easier on yourself in a jar like this, I could have warmed up the oil first and then poured it in here, but then I'd have to sit and wait for it to solidify again, and I am an impatient individual. I have a lot of things to get done during the day. I don't feel like sitting around waiting on this to solidify. I guess I could have stuck it in the fridge, but whatever. For the sake of this video, boom, just like that. Now we're just going to take our petals. You want to put them in here, you want to place them, but you actually want to kind of push them down a little bit. But before we get ahead of ourselves, like I just did. Okay, so we've got our oil in our jar. Now we're going to take our butter knife and we're going to score in there. We're going to create little lines in there. What this is doing is creating more surface space to absorb the fragrance of our rose petals. We want to absorb as much of the fragrance into this as we possibly can. Now I'm going to take my rose petals. There's the pretty side, you know, the front of the rose petal, and there's the back side. I'm going to place the front side down in here, and I'm just going to gently press them into the oil. You don't want to like bury them in the oil, but you also don't want to just have them sitting there and they're not really making contact. The contact is what is going to allow this solid fat to pull the fragrance molecules from the rose into itself. That's what we want. So we're just going to place these guys in there, just gently press them down. Now I'm going to be watching these being rose petals. They're going to dry fairly quickly. I will probably replace these maybe once, twice a day. Definitely one where you want to definitely be watching it daily. I mean, I watched my other one, the big one. This one, it's not totally full of roses yet, but this one, it's literally watched twice a day. This one, okay, so the big one, we watch this one twice a day and replace the flowers. Some of them will have to be replaced daily if they really are just drying out too quickly or maybe they mold. But on this one, if the flowers are drying out quickly, I might have to replace some every day. But for the most part, because these are larger, because these are whole roses that are fresh, it could take 2 to 3 days for some of these to wear out. Whereas with the petals, I'm looking at these drying very, very, very quickly, and I'll probably be replacing them pretty much daily. And I'll just take a fork or let's say a pair of tweezers and I'll very gently pull these guys out of my jar and replace them with a new one. That's all I'll be doing, is just real easily doing that. Now this one I'm hoping to go 2 weeks, hopefully closer to 6 to 8 weeks of replacing flower petals in here. because I want, the longer you go, the more fragrance you're going to be able to catch. And that's the whole thing you want. You want to catch as much fragrance as you possibly can. When you're doing this, you're going to want to use a glass container or stainless steel. You can use wood, but you got to be really cautious of what's potentially in the wood that's going to then go into your fat. You know, that solid fat is going to absorb things from the wood. That could be smells, that could be contaminants, you name it. I don't prefer to use wood. And then metal, you're just going to want stainless steel. It's the safest option to go with, less chance of absorbing anything that you really don't want to absorb. Now this oil is going to be excellent for if you're feeling anxious or some tension or stress, or if you just really, like, I just want to be able to smell the beautiful smell of roses over the wintertime. So that's what I'm really looking forward to. Plus, roses have such great benefits for the skin. So this oil, then it's a small jar. Honestly, this one's going to be more of a fragrance jar, whereas this one, I'm making the larger batch. This will be excellent for skincare. Put it on the face, dry spots on your skin, anything like that. Whereas this one is definitely more of just a perfume jar. Just take a dab, put it on a pulse point. There you go. You're good to go. When this is all done, the end of the weeks, when we're all done with this, I'm going to pull all these pieces out, like I said. Make sure there's nothing left behind. And I'll stir it to really make sure all the fragrance is throughout the fat. And it's going to be stored in a nice, dry, cool place. Dark if you can. And it'll last easily up to 1 year, just hanging out like that. And you'd be surprised because it's coconut oil, or even your fat, your tallow, your lard, whatever. It really, very little goes a very, very long way. So it lasts a really long time. But when you wear it, you're going to want to put it, you could put it all over your skin. But I like to put it at my pulse points, you know, places like that where it's going to get warm and release the fragrance if I'm wearing it like a perfume. Okay, once we've got this all filled up, which I think I've pretty much got there, it's all filled up, I'm going to cover this. I don't want to cover this with a canning jar and seal it. Even though I'm only using petals, they are fresh petals, they have moisture. If we seal it with a hard lid, it's going to allow moisture to build within the jar while this is going, and you don't want that. That's going to allow microbes to spore out and start growing. Mold can start growing. So what I'm going to do is use some plastic wrap. I'll put it over the top lightly. I'm not going to just jam it on there. I'm going to lightly cover it with plastic wrap, and that's the same thing I'll be doing with the big one. Lightly cover this with plastic wrap. And then I'm going to take and poke just a few holes in it to allow it to breathe. I'll use a toothpick to poke those holes. And then we're just going to store this every day, check it 2-3 times a day, check it, replace the petals as needed. When they're turning brown or if they get real weird, replace those petals with new ones. It'll sit dark, dry, cool spot for hopefully 2 weeks at the bare minimum, hopefully 6 to 8 if weather cooperates. And then, like I said, at the end, take all of your petals out, give it a good stir, and let it store it in a nice, dry, dark, cool location. It'll store easily for a year. But yes, cover this with something like plastic wrap, but not terribly tight. The whole idea of covering it is so that it'll absorb the smell of the rose, not your surroundings. And you also don't want anything to potentially fall in there. I live in an agriculture area. We get a lot of dust this time of year from the farmers that have worked their fields and now they're working them under and replanting. So I get a lot of different, just various dust, and my windows are open, so we get a lot of dust right here. So by covering it with plastic and then just a couple holes, or you could use, instead of plastic, I actually, now that I've thought about this, this is probably the direction I'll go, is that I'll use a coffee filter. Coffee filter is perfect. It doesn't have any really bigger holes, like the potential for the toothpick holes, but it'll allow this to breathe without allowing anything to fall into it. I don't have any coffee filters that are big enough to cover this guy, but another thought with this one is I could place like a paper towel over it, or like, let's say, a newspaper. Nothing super thick, but just kind of place it over the top of it, and it'll allow that allow it to breathe and absorb. So there you go, guys. There's your crash course in how to make your own very own, very easy to make Rose Enfleurage without breaking the bank. Alright guys, if you have any question, I would love to hear from you or comments. So I look forward to hearing from you. Bye guys.